Greetings, all. We are adding just a brief introduction to today's episode of History Matters, and so does coffee, because of the way events transpired today, Friday, March 22nd. We recorded this 10 o'clock in the morning, as always, to discuss how the wild conspiracy theories and press coverage and rumors and gossip surrounding Kate Middleton's non-appearance in public, how that really says a lot about the moment that we're in and how difficult it is to differentiate between fact and fiction. So, the point of today's episode, as you will see when you watch it, is really to center on the simple fact that we need to really think hard about what we're seeing and what we're receiving in the way of information and how we respond to it. The many ways in which people ran in all directions regarding Kate Middleton's status and what it meant that she wasn't appearing in public really highlights the degree to which, particularly at this moment in time, when politically our ability to see things as they are is important, why it's important to keep that in mind. So that was the point of today's episode. We did not know when we recorded this episode what was revealed several hours later, that Kate Middleton has been diagnosed with cancer. So we simply wanted to make it clear the episode is in no way intended to make light of Kate Middleton's health, but rather is focused more on the response to her non-appearance and how important it is for us to think before responding, as today's news makes all too clear. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to History Matters, and so does coffee. Today, we are going to be addressing the question about where the heck is Kate Middleton, but not in the way you might be assuming. I think the whole uproar about her has so much to say about where we are right now and about us. But before I plunge into that, I turn to my partner in crime, Annie, who will explain the rules of the game.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Annie Evans from New American History, and I'm delighted to be here as I am every Friday. Today, you're going to enjoy a conversation for about 30 minutes. Joanne's going to talk about the topic, and then we are going to get into some questions. And the way this works is you put the questions about today's topic in the Q&A. Feel free to chat about everything else in the chat, but if you'd like your question addressed live in about 30 minutes, it's got to be in the Q&A. We'll see you in a little bit.
Okay. And if you are here for the first time, please go into chat. Be sure you're saying it to everyone and let folks know that you're here for the first time or one of the first times that you're here, because you will get a robust welcome from the History Matters community, which is a community. This might be the 207th episode. Normally, the person who normally tells me this is momentarily not here, but I think it's the 207th episode. Over those episodes, we've built an amazing community here. So you will be welcomed if you tell folks that you're new. Okay, so the question of Kate Middleton. The reason I thought of this, and obviously it's not new news that we don't quite know what's happening with her, where she is, or we don't know anything. I'm going to get into that in a minute. What fascinates me about this, and initially I will say, I thought I would approach this from a, Americans and the royal family and why the heck are we so interested in them? But I abandoned that in favor of something that reflected what I found when I went online and began to research to pull something together for us this morning, because the way in which people, and particularly Americans, but not, as you will see, not just Americans, are addressing this question of where is Kate Middleton, says so much about the current moment. So that's what I wanted to unpack this morning, is what can we see or learn from what's going on with the amazing amount of press coverage in one way or another that the absence of Kate Middleton shows. Now, I'm going to offer a very, very quick sort of timeline of what we kind of sort of know. So I'm going to say, actually, at the outset, boy, even the things we think we know, we don't know. So I'm going to say all kinds of things here, and I will not stake my reputation on the truth, only because, and this is going to be part of my point today, we don't know precisely so many things, even from sources that seemingly you could absolutely trust. At this point, who the heck knows? But at any rate, the timeline. So as far as I know, well, we'll come back to this. Generally speaking, Kate Middleton hasn't really been seen since December. I'll come back to that momentarily. She had abdominal surgery of some kind in January. There was a photo that appeared at one point of her with her kids smiling, which was photoshopped, probably. She claimed to have photoshopped it. We don't know, but so there was a photo that probably wasn't really a photo of the present, with the "I botched the photoshopping of it" excuse, which might be true, but we don't know. Then there was a photograph of her in a black SUV, I believe, with her mother. And you kind of saw her face. Another photo of her, I believe, in a car with her husband, William. Again, kind of grainy, couldn't really tell. Then there's the infamous video of supposedly Kate and William walking through a farmer's market. Is that really her? I don't know. Maybe it's her. It could be her. Some very authoritative, credible sources say it is her, and then some say it isn't, and I have no idea. But there was that footage supposedly showing Kate Middleton. The royal family says, and I'm sure they didn't think about the implications of this, that they initially said she's not going to reappear until Easter. So she's going to rise at Easter. I'm sorry. I'm not even Christian. And I'm like, really? You want her to sort of make an appearance at Easter? At any rate. And then there's another scandal that supposedly a staff member at the hospital where she was tried to get her records, but again, that's a different, yet another rabbit hole of many rabbit holes to go down, but that's also sort of looming around out there in space. So basically, she went into the hospital where she supposedly had abdominal surgery. People who the heck knows, probably that's the case. But if you go online and even dismiss the wacky sources, the amount of information flowing from all sides with a million different theories about this is kind of mind-blowing. So we just know we don't know. That's what we know. Now let's look here for a minute at the range of responses to Kate's non-appearance, to her absence, right? So this isn't even really a response to seeing something and saying, you could say the farmer's market video, people said, oh, she looks so thin. Oh, that's not her. Oh, a lot of O's you could fill in as to how people interpreted it. But at any rate, regardless of the footage, the video footage, or the photographs, basically all of the things I'm going to be talking about this morning are a response to not seeing her. Okay, so the most trivial, I would say, of all of them, not widespread, but floating around out there, is actually probably the most trivial of all and not credible to me at all. But I'm going to offer you the spectrum that she got bangs and she's growing them out. I didn't make that up. Somewhat less trivial, but equally in that realm, she got a facelift. And she's hiding because she got a facelift. Now, number one, I see the little laughing faces rising on the right side of the screen, which I appreciate. Both of those, she got a facelift or she got bangs, right? So immediately, the most trivial responses have to do with her appearance. Oh, she vanished because she's worried about what she looks like. And that's all this is, which is partly like condemning her for caring about what she looks like, right? So part of it is like a little bit misogynistic, like, oh, this whole big fuss and she got a facelift. But also really like given everything that's swirling around with the royal family right now, because I've said nothing about King Charles, about the fact that he's ill. There's so much spinning around right now, and she got bangs just kind of tells you what people focus on if there's a woman involved. Okay, so that's most trivial. Another way in which the treatment that this question is getting shows us something is certainly, and related to what I just said, says a lot about how we look at women, but even more than that, how we believe the royal family treats women. And I said we believe because at this point, I wanted to say how the royal family treats women, but who knows what's real and not real? So I'll hedge it in. Regardless, when you look at the footage of what's happening now, some of the response, particularly in America, is remember when Meghan Markle was pregnant and she was treated horribly. Remember the horrible treatment of Meghan Markle. And now look, Kate's vanished and she's being, generally speaking in England, she's being allowed her silence, and she's getting treated much better than Meghan Markle ever was. So some people are basically saying, this gets right back. I'm going to come back to Meghan Markle in a minute. This gets right back to the comparison between the two of them and ultimately then to questions of race. Other people are saying that maybe she just doesn't want to be looked at. And they're hearkening back to Diana, saying, that she was hunted down and the degree to which people needed to stare at her and constantly was horrible, and that Kate is now going through the same thing. But her response has been to say, I don't want to be looked at. I'm just going to do what I need to do. And that's that, which again has to do with how women in the royal family are treated. In the case of what I said at the outset, how the royal family treats women as well. Getting to Meghan Markle, right? There are people that are saying whatever is happening in the according to many, kid gloves with which Kate's disappearance is being treated, it stands in stark contrast to any way in which Meghan Markle was treated as a person of color, and that she was mocked by the British press and attacked, and Kate isn't. Kate is being treated in a totally different way, and that this boils down to race and racism, which again, very much of this moment, that becomes part of the conversation. And for good reason, given I'm not going to go back and rehash everything that happened originally when Meghan Markle made her appearance in this realm, but still, the question of race is bound up. So we have race, we have gender, we have a little bit of misogyny tossed in there. Let's add something else into the mix, and that is feelings about the royal family, feelings about the royals. And Americans are projecting in this case and saying, like, no one trusts the royal family. In the United States, some people are smitten with things that happen. I mean like coronations or weddings, and they watch up on TV, they line up and they wear tiaras and they sort of engage in this love of royalty, which in a sense is a love of a very special kind of celebrity. But still, a lot of people now are saying that around the world, but even in England, that there's now a lack of public trust in the royal family, because can you believe anything they say, right? And there are any number of concoctions of theories that you can make up about what's going on now that might involve King Charles being unable to serve in his job, and maybe William having to step up, and then what's going to be Kate's role. And one of the many things that fascinates me about this situation is that conspiracy thinking is happening on all sides. And even if you don't want to engage in conspiracy thinking, right? I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but some part of me is like, what's the logic here? Because it makes no sense, right? It kind of makes no sense that there are all these weird things appearing and disappearing, and no one just coming right out and saying, she's fine. Here she is waving from a window. I mean, there are a lot of ways in which this could be sort of cast aside, and it isn't being. So it kind of lends itself to conspiracy thinking, but even on a much lesser level. What could you actually believe that's coming out from the royal family? What is believable? To what degree are any of the images, any of what they're saying, how much of that can be believed? Some are also saying, sort of related to the, the number of things that are sort of bound up with this, King Charles' health, et cetera, et cetera. Now there's the fact that supposedly William had an affair with a woman named Rose Hansbury. That's, I think, or at least to me, relatively new in the realm of things that people are tossing onto the bonfire of what to do with Kate Middleton's non-appearance, and that maybe she is not appearing in public because it's spite, because she's angry at the fact that there was that affair. And so she's just not going to step forward and clear up anything for anyone. Finally, this morning I discovered, and some of you may know about this, I did not, that attached to Rose Hansberry is yet another way in which the current moment is being reflected in this mess of gossip and maybe facts. And that is, supposedly there was a photo of Rose Hansberry, the alleged mistress of William, who is a British model, lounging in her house, and that people who looked closely at the photo saw a lot of art and furniture from China, and that now, and that came from her husband and his family, but that now the question of whether in the 19th century her husband's family pilfered Chinese goods at a moment when many people were stealing Chinese culture and art, and looting them basically and bringing them into the West. Maybe Rose Hansberry is lounging on looted Chinese furniture, which sounds ridiculous. However, Chinese social media. Here is, I'm not going to try and pronounce the Instagram-ish Chinese social media platform that begins with an X, because I'm going to say it badly and I'll be embarrassed. But apparently there's a Chinese social media platform that said, quote, "The luxurious life of Prince William's mistress Rose actually came from China." And it goes on to say that the furniture was looted, and that, so now we're adding in cultural appropriation, elitism, and the elite sort of looting the world to get what they want. We're throwing that into the mix as well. I don't know how far that has spread, because that's a new one to me. I saw it mentioned yesterday. Not surprisingly, it's all over, apparently, Chinese social media, talking about where that furniture came from and what it means that they have that furniture. Now, yet more representative fodder of this moment, American social media and social media of other countries. American social media. So apparently now, and this is hardly going to be surprising, Kate has become a meme of sorts. So, and I did not see this, and I'm not going to tell you to go look at the site formerly known as Twitter, but apparently on their official account on that site, the New York City Sanitation Department posted a photoshopped photo of Kate standing behind a garbage bin. And the caption was, "Kate's been found. She's putting her trash out in bins. Be like Kate." The city of New York, so the city of New York, reposted that image and added to it, "Breaking. Upon investigation, this image has been photoshopped. However, those rat-proof lidded bins are very real. Use them." I can't even imagine, at this point, if you are Kate Middleton. Anyway, so the city of New York and New York Sanitation jumped on the meme. Dublin Airport posted an image of, the farmer's market image of William and Kate, and at their airport, Dublin Airport, and said, "Great to see passengers looking so happy and relaxed this morning." Prague Airport reposted that and added to it, "They've just arrived from Dublin Airport. Where are they going to next?" Okay, so now they're just like representative consumers, Kate and William, like, here they are being happy, and it's obviously photoshopped and goofy, so you're going to laugh because we're all in on the joke, but we're also going to use them to advertise. And there's, I stopped at this point because I ran out of time, but I'm sure if I had more time to rummage around, online, there would be more ways in which their image is being deployed by social media in countries around the world, with memeish, slightly sardonic bemusement, to use this moment to have a sort of tongue-in-cheek, knowing little, we're clever, we're in on what's going on, and we're going to use this incident to advertise ourselves. Now, given everything that I've just said, there are so many rabbit holes here. And this morning I literally just had to stop because you start looking and you're like, wait, someone thinks that? Like, some more than one person thinks that? Someone thinks that too? I at a certain point, a very early point, I just gave up trying to determine what was real. And that's maybe the most indicative fact of this very moment, is that what we are in the middle of, even with the royal family making pronouncements, even with lawyers weighing in, even with the Associated Press like pulling back that Photoshop photo, even with seeming authorities weighing in, it's really hard to know what's real. We don't know what photos are real. We don't know what the footage is real. We don't know what facts are real. And in that space, everything that I just talked about is being projected, thrown in. Think about the fact. Now, first of all, the simple fact that she's just not around and all of this is happening in her absence, in and of itself, if it weren't for social media, this wouldn't be happening. So again, that's very much of this moment. But aside from that, the degree to which you honestly can't tell what facts are real, what facts are trumped up, and I assume most of them are, but I don't know. Even with formal authorities making pronouncements, who the heck knows, right? We don't know. And think about, and we've talked about this in other ways, I would say, democracy related, more serious ways, of the dangers of being in a climate where you can't tell truth from lie. You can't tell the reality of something. What I'm talking about here, is so evocative of this moment when we honestly don't know what's real and what's fake, what's created by AI or photoshopped or whatever. Even without the technology, we were already being challenged as to what's real and what's not, with Russia piping things into this country and then some on the right, like tossing it off as though it's real. We're in a moment when we are so fundamentally challenged to know fact from lie, to know truth from spin, or the deliberate planting of misinformation, disinformation to mislead us. We are so in the middle of that moment. It's hard to imagine something that could show that in more, because it's removed from the whole democracy question, in more striking and obvious a way than the degree to which there are endless stories being attached to the fact that we have not really seen Kate Middleton. This entire swirling eddy of gossip and rumor and lie and fact and maybe and I don't know and rabbit holes, that's the moment that we're in on so many levels. And if you're talking about politics, if you're talking about government, if you're talking about democracy, I am not the first person by far to say that if you don't know fact from fiction, if you can't tell what's really happening from what isn't happening, you can't come together. You can't join to fight things that need to be fought. You don't know what needs to be fought because you don't know what's happening. It's a very dangerous situation in a democracy. It's a situation that is ripe for people to be misled into not responding or overreacting or doing something that is being pushed for by someone who wants to take control, someone who wants power, someone who wants authority. facts and reality and an educated public that can read and evaluate for themselves, that's the opposite. That's the enemy of authoritarianism. It means that you have the ability to see things for what they are, that you are less likely, not impossible, but less likely to be just led astray by a string because you can't evaluate what's happening around you. That's a moment that we're in right now. And so while so much about the Kate Middleton story is amusing, I think more than anything else, we need to acknowledge the fact that it really exposes the nature of the moment that we're in. In her case, right, news or non-news is being spun for consumption and profit. But what I'm talking about as on a broader level is facts, information of one kind or another being spun for political purpose, being spun not to inform, but to disinform, to misinform, to lead astray, to silence, to threaten. The ways in which we are in a moment where, just as, you know, we have no idea what the heck's going on with the royal family and with Kate, we will have an increasingly difficult time knowing what is or isn't true in our current political situation. And I can't overemphasize, right, the way in which that's dangerous. How can you, this is why I've talked about it many times before. This is why people like Thomas Jefferson said education is vital in a small r republic, a democratic republic. Why? Because the public needs to be able to recognize threats to the republic so that they can fend them off. Well, if you're misled about the threats and you're kept in the dark about what those threats mean by being denied, having books banned or being denied certain kinds of education, guess what? You're not going to respond to the threats. So an informed public, a public that can read and think for itself, that can evaluate reality versus non-reality, that's pretty fundamental to a working democracy. And we are being more challenged on that front than I think we may realize. And to me, that's the most important lesson to be pulled out of what I'm talking about today. The degree to which crazy spin is happening over Kate Middleton should be an in-our-face reminder of the degree to which we have to be really careful consumers of evidence, of facts, of news, the degree to which we need to be aware of the spin and the lies that are going to be tossed off at us that we need to stop and think carefully and read, and the degree to which that simple fact is a danger to democracy. All of this that we can see and sort of stand back and giggle a little bit because it's a celebrity and it's in another country and all the reasons in which it feels safer to talk about these factors when you're talking about Kate. To me, that just makes it like a spotlight on the inherent dangers to democracy that grow from the moment that we're in. Okay, started out laughing, ended not laughing. Okay, I'm waiting for the mug. Let's see here. You guys are so caught up in conversation. I didn't even see oh, there. Thank you, Tom.
And somebody thinks it's 208th episode, but Carolee's
it could be.
So we need our mathematician.
I never know.
I don't either.
It's 200 and something.
Someone said 208, so I'm going to go with that.
I'll believe you because I have no idea. That was a total guess on my part. Okay. This won't be a stretch from the image. I went to my cabinets and I was like, oh, for crying out loud, royalty, king, royal family. What am I going to have? And then I discovered this.
Oh, wow. Where have you been hiding that one?
I know. I believe it's from Austria.
Oh.
From like the royal horsemen of blah, blah, blah. Oh, no, I take it back. It's from France. But it's the ooh la la. It's from the royal horsemen, blah, blah, blah. They're not even the same on both sides.
Oh, wow.
We have this proud guy, and then we have this proud guy um doing very fancy royal horsemanship. So I don't know if this is the first appearance of a mug. Maybe it is. It's not the Royal Horse Guards. It's the Musée du Cheval in the Domaine de Chantilly in France. I can't tell you more about it, except that it definitely suits our topic today. So I was surprised. Wow. I was thrilled. You have to, if there were a camera in my kitchen capturing my expression when I really think I'm lost and then I find something, I'm like,
this is perfect.
It's something royalty-ish. Okay, I'll stop so that we can open things up for questions.
So the chat has been on fire, but we also do have some questions oh my gosh, we have 13 questions. This is crazy. Okay. We're going to start with Troy. He literally got his in first. He says, "Good morning, HMers." I think that's our new tagline for History Matters, folks. HMers. I like it. How do we encourage ourselves and others to think more critically rather than so emotionally? Ooh. The fire hose of internet info is causing us to make snap judgments at the expense of clear thinking just when we need clear thinking the most.
That is first of all, an excellent point, right? And it's one that we've talked about a lot here, which is if you see something or read something and it makes you have an emotional response, that's the moment to pause and to think, who might want me to be feeling that way? Like, am I being pulled in to responding in a way that somebody wants? The question of what to do about that, what advice to give to people about that, I don't know if I have better advice than that simple thing, which is to use yourself as a monitor of sorts, as a meter of sorts, that if you see something and it gets you really mad, doesn't mean you shouldn't be really mad. It means that that's a moment to just pause and consider who's giving you the information, what the information is, how credible is it, and might someone want you to be having that response. Those questions will not help you interpret whatever the information is, but it will allow you to think about your emotional response as a piece of evidence, right? When you're evaluating something that you're told, your response to it should be considered a piece of evidence. Whatever it evokes in you, pause and consider what that is, what it means. Might someone want you to be thinking that way? So that might be my best answer to that question, is that the emotion itself should be considered evidence of what something means. And I guess, I didn't make up the phrase rage harvesting, but that's very much, an idea born of our time, that you plant things and then you harvest the rage for political purpose. Pausing if you're feeling strong emotions, just to consider what you know about what you've just read, I think couldn't be more important right now. And that's a great question because it touches on that directly.
Troy only puts great questions in the box. Okay. Our good friend Lori Dowd asks, since words matter, where are the lines between gossip, news, analysis, speculation, theory, and conspiracy? That is a teachable moment right there, Lori. You just wrote a whole lesson plan for us.
That is a whole lesson plan. And those things there's not a clear line between all of those things. And some of it might have to do with actual evidence as opposed to, what I heard. It makes me think of, so my first book, the second chapter of my first book is on political gossip. And, I spent a long time researching gossip, looking for it in 18th century correspondence among the political elite, thought for a little while that I was going to die and my dissertation was going to go, feet up dead because I couldn't find any. And then I realized people weren't writing down the gossip. They were referring to the fact that it had passed them by, right? Did you hear what this said about Hamilton? And they wouldn't write it down because they didn't want to be responsible for it. But did you hear what they said? That's a pretty good indicator. So gossip sometimes, doesn't necessarily reflect on its truth or falseness, but there is a transmission process often that is involved in gossip, a person-to-person transmission process, and whether that's person to person on some form of technology or in person. But, you can't say facts differentiate these things, because you could argue that conspiracy theories are grounded on facts of a kind. You might be stringing together facts in a really interesting way, but you could argue, I suppose, that there are facts woven together to create a conspiracy. So, I would say all of those things are related. It's why the question, was it Troy who just made that question?
That was Lori's question. Troy
No,
made the
no,
one before.
before
Oh,
Lori.
yeah, Troy's was before,
Troy.
yes.
Okay. So that goes right back to Troy's question, right? About how are you measuring, how are you evaluating what you see? Read the string of nouns again because it was great.
Okay. Gossip, news, analysis, speculation, theory, and conspiracy.
And you could throw opinion in there too. That should be included as well. I
Yep.
think that is like a lesson plan. Particularly given that, nowadays, just recently we saw opinion become fact, become politics, right? In the Her report, whether Her report says, wow, if he went to trial, I bet a jury would consider him like an old man whose mind is compromised. That was an opinion. That wasn't a fact. And actually, the facts in the report contradict that. That would be a great example of the sort of thing we're talking about here, right? That was someone's opinion, not a medical person, just someone's opinion planted in there. And then, we had a week of people talking about it as though it was fact. So the fact that all of those things are there and that they're related, but that they're different, that would be, again, I'm not the person who could come up off the top of my head with the wonderful superior lesson plan, but to get students to think about how they can differentiate those things, even just as simple as news, analysis, and opinion, right? What is opinion versus what is news? We talk about this in other ways when we complain about modern day journalism, right? And horse race coverage of politics nowadays, right? You could say, okay, that's factual. And you could say, it's interpretive in a way, but it's also a kind of spin. It's also a kind of framing. It's also, in a way, imposing an opinion about what's important or what isn't important by saying, let's just focus on he's ahead, he's behind, he's ahead, he's behind. So that Lori, that's a wonderful question, because the simple fact that those things can't necessarily be easily put into separate boxes is really important to consider. And again, the sort of thing that I was talking about this morning, that the whole Kate Middleton, I don't even know what to call it, kerfuffle. That's such a good word.
Middleton Gate.
Pardon?
Some people were calling it Middleton Gate.
Middleton Gate.
Everything's Watergate oriented
right
now.
Kate Gate. Well, everything is, we could stop at the gate, but we should come up with something else. But at any rate, what I just said about it, that's very much the same thing we're talking about here, which is it just exposes so extremely the ways in which all of these things are bundled together and then thrown at us in a big blob on social media and in the press. And then we have to sort of stand back and figure out, I was in Charlottesville Monday through Wednesday, and I was talking with someone and about the video footage, and one of us was, I think it's been proven false, right? It's been walked back. TMZ walked it back. No, they didn't. Yes, they did. No, they didn't. Really? But the royal family is saying it's real. But like several people with PhDs sitting in a room couldn't like recall what was real and what wasn't, and what had been pulled back and denied, and what that people with PhDs aren't smarter than everybody else, but we're really good at evaluating evidence because we've been trained to as historians, and we were stuck.
Cece just made that same point to me yesterday. That's so funny that you say that. So Joanne, I just put in the chat, you guys did a backstory episode on this exact topic. I don't know if you remember it. It was called Fit to Print. I put a lesson that we did
good.
Using that, and there's a retro report video from PBS that's made specifically for kids to help them with this topic. It's really, really good. So I threw all that in the chat for everybody. But Claire, I want you to send us the questions because I want to keep Lori's for later, because we may do a part 2 of that lesson.
Okay, but thank you for the links. Now I'm
Yeah, that was a great. It's the one with the moon, the man in the moon hoax. Do you remember that episode? It was
Oh,
really,
yes, I do remember that
love that
episode.
episode. They love that episode. Okay, so we got more questions.
I do want to say what Susan just put here, which is very much worth saying. Um, I guess she's quoting Vanity Fair, but the fact that it's talking about there is if she did indeed just have a serious medical procedure and needs time to recover from it, that could be the that
She
could just be
needs
the
a little more
explanation.
time, folks.
That absolutely could be all this is, and a lot of people are going to feel very goofy for running off into, plunging into various rabbit holes for coming up with all kinds of theory. um and absolutely conspiracy theories rush in to come up with reasons and explanations for things that people can't find a way to explain. So it's true, if she were a normal, well, if she were a normal person and she disappeared, we wouldn't know she disappeared,
We wouldn't
but
even know.
still. Right, but still, it is totally possible and even probable that she just had a serious medical procedure and she just needs time to recover. And but what's interesting to me, and really what I've been talking about today, is everything that's filled that space. All the ways in which people haven't necessarily been coming forward and saying that, and have been inventing incredible stories and possibilities and evidence, and the degree to which this is in the press, despite the fact that absolutely maybe she just had a serious medical procedure, period. How unspicy is that? So it's the talk around it, and the information, some of it nonsensical, the all of those things, gossip, analysis, news, report. That's what fascinates me, because I think that's so indicative of right where we are.
Francesca is asking from across the pond, are we all obsessed with their royal family? Do we want our own royal family? Is this the only royal family? Are there other European families that we're obsessing about?
Well, I did, I believe, a year ago, maybe about a year ago, an episode on Americans and the royal family, and the ways in which the royal family is a kind of special kind of celebrity, because they aren't just a celebrity, they're also like a, you know long standing sort of celebrity family that has actual political importance of some kind, and they do things, and this in a sense goes all the way back. And I went back to find my notes from that episode, and I talked about actually I'm thinking about Francesca at this moment, Benjamin Rush going to England and like being able to sit on the throne of the King of England and being like, oh, the earth shook. I was touching the throne of the King of, that there's always been a degree to which Americans are just fascinated by royal anything, because we don't have something like that here. And for so long, it was considered the peak of the peak for Americans before they became national Americans. So some of it, I think, is just that. It's different and gilded. But the Kennedys, right? We do goofy things to the Kennedy family. They do goofy things to themselves. But we treat certain families or certain people, but particularly families, that family, the same way in which they become as a family of interest. And if you're just in that family, somehow or other, you're going to get a lot of attention. So, but I think it has to do with the glamour and the fact that it's not, to Americans at least, it doesn't feel like mere celebrity. That there's a gloss of like reality and government and importance and history, that doesn't attach itself to mere Hollywood celebrity, and that gives it added glamour, maybe an added, seemingly it feels more significant.
Yeah, and Cece followed up because she did a good bit of teaching over in England. She's wondering if the obsession was really there before Diana, or is Diana what kind of set it off, or have we just always been obsessed by?
It's true. And that's, I don't know the answer to that, but it's entirely possible that Diana set things off because, the people's princess, because she seemed so human and eventually overwhelmed, in a way that people could identify with. And the very thing that she was good at and that made her stand out as a member of the royal family might be what attracted this kind of attention. I don't know. I know that actually also, Heather and I, on our podcast Now and Then, did an episode on this too, which is, you can find and post it. We talked about the same idea. What did I just see here that I wanted
We'll
to
see who
comment?
finds it first.
Yes, I'm right. Now, James said, was Dr. Rush sincere about that, or was he hoping England would stop messing with the US? No, he was sincere. He was very sincere. I mean, he just was moved at the idea that he was, touching the throne of the King of England and all. It's a longer quote that I'm not doing justice about all that's embodied in the throne of the King of England. So, in that case, he actually was sincere.
Hmm. So Kathy asked, there are many laws that have been passed in different states to tank public schools versus private schools. Is that part of this far-right nationalist grab to power?
I'm going to say one thing, and then you're going to have to repeat that.
Okay.
I agree with people saying that there has been always an obsession with royalty. Diana didn't create it, but she did take it to another level.
I always thought Grace Kelly was sort of the way we got hooked on the whole royal thing. My mother used to talk about Grace Kelly going over there and marrying Monaco royalty. And
well, but there was also, who was the divorcee? I can't even remember her name.
Oh, I can see your face.
I know, me too.
Wallace Simpson. Wallace Simpson? Is that her name?
Yes, I believe. So we've always been interested in that stuff, but I do believe it's like sort of extra bonus celebrity-ness to Americans that has a gloss of greater importance than mere Hollywood celebrity. But anyway, I did want to say that it did not begin with Diana, and I didn't mean to suggest it did, but she took it to a whole different level. So I'm sorry, what was the question you just asked?
Now I forgot which one I asked because there's so many in the queue. Okay, well, I'll just go with one that's in front of me. It may not be the one I said a second ago. Well, a lot of people in the chat and James over here in the Q&A have been talking about people pushing for England to become the 51st state. And is this just a ploy? They're going to distract us with Kate Middleton while they apply for statehood. I haven't been seeing that on social media.
I haven't seen that
but it's an interesting idea. Can you imagine?
I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that either. So yeah, I can't. James is trying to start it. No, I haven't.
Your motives, James.
I haven't seen that at all. Although I don't know if Jessica. I think Jessica's not here. But I was talking with her yesterday, and she said this piece of trivia. She said that Meghan Markle's kid. Her first child was born in England, but her second child was born in the United States, which means that second child is an American citizen, which means that he would be entitled to be president of the United States, which would mean that the British monarchy could take over the United States.
Lilibet will become the conqueror. She will restore the empire.
The second child is a she or he. She. Thank you. I was a little lost there in the middle of my sentence. That she could then represent England taking control once again, which is silly, but I had to say it because it made me laugh a lot yesterday. So.
But it will become a meme and that poor child's face will be on it. And she was named after Queen Elizabeth, so there you go. All right, Bonnie is asking, where are we on the progress of a Dem and Republican version of discharge petitions in the House of Representatives to work around Speaker Johnson refusing to bring bills to the House floor? Do we need to be clean of radical border demands?
Wait, you got to read that again.
She's asking where we are with a version of discharge petitions in the House because the speaker keeps refusing to bring certain bills to the floor. How are we in that process?
I don't know. By discharge petitions, I'm not sure what that.
Know what that phrase is? Yeah.
Yeah.
We'd have to do some more research. Tim, find us a link quick on discharge petitions.
Yeah, because I'm just not keying into that phrase.
I don't either. I've never heard it. That doesn't mean it's not out there.
To do with forcing something to be addressed, even though the speaker won't take it to the floor. But I've missed that.
Okay. We'll see if somebody puts a.
There we go. Tim put up a link.
Of course he did.
Of course he did. I'm going to let you look at it because I'm afraid if I click on it, everything will blow up.
Yeah. I don't know that I can read that while we're in the middle of a live broadcast.
Okay.
Maybe
anyway,
we pull that up later. Okay.
All right.
She wanted to know if you can compare the Kate Middleton. This is Deb. Can you compare the Kate Middleton situation with the Lloyd Austin situation? I'm not familiar with Lloyd Austin. Are you?
Lloyd Austin.
Guys, you gotta put questions in that we know.
Who is Lloyd Austin? Clearly,
I
it is
don't
not the same
know.
situation. Oh, I feel horrible. Who is Lloyd
We
Austin?
can compare them because we don't know.
Secretary of Defense? But
Oh,
why?
the guy that had the, yes, the guy that had the surgery and didn't tell Biden
Oh,
and he hid it. Okay, I just didn't, yeah, he's his household
okay.
name.
No, I didn't. I was
That is a good
thinking,
question, actually, yeah.
yeah, well, but it is, but it isn't, because of the very thing that his name does not immediately ring bells, right? It is, you know, well,
The
it raises a different question.
speculation,
It
is
raises
he
a different question.
dying? Yeah,
You know, what, you know, government officials of various sorts should tell those in power versus what the public should know, right? We don't necessarily have a right to know anything about Kate, other than she had a serious procedure and she's recovering. You know, you could say that's it, somehow or other, it has become impossible for the royal family to just say that. Like, it's spun out of control. And so now it wasn't helped by the photoshopped image, but at any rate, the way that this is strung along, you know, one would hope that at some early point, if the royal family had said, nope, it's just really simple, serious procedure, she's recovering, but she's fine, that this might have been stopped in its tracks. But in the case of Lloyd Austin, the question there would be, you know, he should have told the president. We don't necessarily need to know that, but the president sure does, right? So we're talking about different things. But it is a valid question to ask and to assume that if you're a person with a great deal of public authority with a government role, you can't just vanish, right? You have to, there are plans in place about what happens and who takes over if something happens to you, and that you need to be part of that process.
And Gloria says, and I always have trouble pronouncing this word, she said it makes for prurient interests.
Right. Well, and, you know, people just generally love to gossip about important people. They just do. Now, you know, here's an interesting thing that I wrote about in my first book. And I watched the spread of gossip and how people responded to it. And one of the things that gossip did at the time was reveal who was in or out of your group. So in other words, if you understood the gossip and you really liked it, you're like, ooh, that's good. That put you on one side. If you either didn't understand the gossip or dismissed it, kind of puts you on the other side. In the book I was writing about Republicans versus Federalists, there's Republican gossip and Federalist gossip, and people responded to different forms of gossip, different pieces of gossip, totally defined the group and the mental landscape that person had. So that's an interesting, I didn't apply that to what I've been talking about this morning. But that would be interesting to see too, like to see who's believing what, the groups of people who are believing what, and to see what that suggests about what they share in common in their sort of general outlook, their mental landscape, whether that's political or cultural or social.
So Daniel might have had to hop off in the chat, he said, but he posed a question. He said, in 2016, it seems the press gave then candidate Trump a pass in order to make it a better horse race. Now we see some of that with publications. He mentions the New York Times, but I think there's others. What responsibility does the press have to actually fact check and give context rather than trying to sell clicks by pushing a horse race? What is the line?
Well, that's a hugely important point, right? Because there's a reason why people like James Madison considered the press almost a branch of government. The people need to be informed, and I've talked about this before. It's not as though the press was greatly responsible and then suddenly it became bad. The press has always had, you know, there have always been newspapers that make up stories, and the press has always been, in one way or another, both reliable and unreliable. There's not a golden period for the press on the one hand. On the other hand, yeah, it's really important that at least some of the press really focus on facts, right? And not so much on headlines and framing. Now, we are thinking about headlines and framing now more than we generally did, because the horse race component is so obvious. And so many people are stepping forward and saying, really, that's what we're going to get even now? Here's what the polls say, this versus this. And no one's going to talk about larger stories or analysis, right? Going back to the first question, what does it mean if this person wins or if this person wins? The press does have a responsibility. The other thing that's interesting here, and it's not new, it's certainly if you write anything, like you write an opinion piece for a newspaper, you do not control the title and the headline. And, that's kind of major because it ends up framing what you say. And certainly more than once I've written, an opinion piece with my opinion in it. And then a headline has been picked that I've had to object to for one reason or another. Like, no, like number one, that's not what I'm saying. That's almost the opposite of what I'm saying. Or in one case, the headline was something like, I'm a historian and I'm afraid. I was like, yeah, no. like that's beyond gender too. Like I have things to say. That's not what my article is about, right? I'm scared. But at any rate, that's another thing that we're seeing now, and it's connected to clicks, is newspapers focused on getting attention and getting clicks and getting press coverage of the press coverage. And so the headlines, which are important and which do frame a story, being all over the place in one way or another, but often very extreme. And it isn't just the New York Times, but the New York Times particularly, I think, because it has always been seen as, the New York Times and the Washington Post as newspapers of record. And in the current climate that we're in, and given some of the things that certainly insiders at the New York Times have said, it doesn't sound like they're behaving that way, or seem like some newspapers are behaving that way at present. And if there's a time when that kind of behavior would be worst timed, I'm not sure what it is, right? This is a moment where we really, really, really need people to report. This is what happened. Here's the range of implications. Go. Not trying to get clicks, but that's very easy for me to say. And we are in the moment that we're in. So it really, as I've suggested throughout this episode, it might really just fall back on us to be smart consumers, because the press some parts of the press are a little compromised to this moment. And the American press and the press generally, I think, hasn't ever really faced this extreme or concrete a threat to democracy before, to the degree that there are people in power, with power, including a former president, who are not aligning themselves with democracy. I'm not going to go into detail because I talk about this all the time, but this is an extreme kind of moment in American history. And I've said many times here that I think some people are so used to assuming that America will always be fine that they don't perceive the nature of this threat. They're so convinced of American exceptionalism that they don't perceive that everything might not be fine. That's part of this. And I also just think in some ways, the American press hasn't dealt with this kind of not just polarization, but a real divide between democracy and something else. And that's not right now, that's not being reflected in press coverage. And I realize, going back to Troy's initial question, this gets bound up with questions about opinion and analysis and what's fact and what isn't. But that needs to be grappled with and not abandoned or not discussed because it's messy. Because there are pretty, important ways in which we need more information, more balance, less horse race, both sides coverage.
Yeah. And Gloria brought the point about, or someone brought up a point based on Gloria was commenting about the telegraph. We didn't have social media, but she said, like, what about during the Civil War? And someone said the telegraph was still very new technology, but it did definitely expand how quickly people got messages in ways they never had before. So
I've talked about that before, and actually one of the chapters in my most recent book talks about that too, and that people were spinning things all over the place, and there were reporters in Washington from faraway places that wouldn't have been there before, because now they can get news home in a way that they couldn't before. So the press community no longer was a little community, and people were so excited at the technology of it. You know, the front pages of newspapers would have a column often, and it would be titled telegraphic, right? It was like, wow, the telegraph. And sometimes you would see in a column, like, we think this, we think this, we think this. Actually, no. Like, you would see them trying to process the news. So yeah, the telegraph at another crucial moment, right before a handful of years before the Civil War, speeds up news, spreads coverage of news, takes spin out of the control that it was in before, for better and worse, and massively complicates things. I think the quote I apply to it in the book and elsewhere is, um, democratic politics is a kind of conversation between people who we give power to and we, the people who give that power, and anything that complicates that conversation complicates democracy. And that was what the telegraph did, and we're watching that happen in any number of different ways now.
All right, it's a little bit after 11. We still have 7 questions. We didn't get through them
7
all.
questions.
I know. We might be able to hit a couple in the after party though, because some of them were a little bit off topic, but still interesting.
Okay.
But
is there anything we could do, like one more?
I think so. Dave had a pretty interesting question talking about, with the whole Kate Middleton scandal, what's been coming out recently about AI being able to produce audio and video deep fakes, and wondering like how this is going to play out as we get closer to the election.
No,
Scary.
it's scary, right? I mean, I don't know. And the fact is, we're just ripe for something like that. You know, the degree to which this is out there and one can think about it. I got a phone call in the last week, and someone, actually, no, I got it 2 days ago from my insurance company, asking about an accident and calling me Oliver. Right. And I Googled where it came from, and and then I got something else. Like, first I got a text, and then I got an email, and I responded and just said, "No, Oliver, wrong number." And then I hung up and thought, did I offer them enough words that they can take them and do something with my voice? And
Yeah.
And the fact that I had to think that, how many words did I give them, and can they use that some way to do something with my voice? This is craziness. That's where we are, right? That isn't a crazy thing to think. So anyway, okay. I guess maybe if there one more question we could address.
Well, Lori was asking, have we always been so exploitive with images of the higher ups, like with images specifically?
Yes, but not necessarily with realism. The problem is that now we can do things and exploit things, and you don't always know that's happening, right? Whereas before, I mean, political cartoons served a purpose. They were exaggerations, they mocked, they were nasty, they were sometimes attempts to stab at the dignity of someone with power. But the problem now is that we don't know always what we're seeing, and that's the real risk of the danger. Yeah, Lori says that's a scam used to begin a conversation.
Yeah, because I got something, I was sitting in a meeting and I looked down, it said, "You have a text from Nikki Haley." And I was like, I don't think so. And then it said, "Kristen, don't forget to vote in the Virginia primary." And I was like, I'm not Kristen. Delete.
Right. No,
But Gloria brings up a good point, because Gloria always brings up a good point. Hi, Gloria. She says, is not the court being used to criminalize the opposition?
It's the court being used to criminalize the opposition. Well, okay, so this is a different topic, and maybe it'll be a topic for next week. I read something that is not a new idea, in which someone said the former President Trump was being persecuted. And my immediate response to that was, well, he's committed alleged crimes and is having trials. And that's our system. And innocent until proven guilty. But if you have very obviously seemingly committed alleged crimes in a way that there's enough evidence to bring charges, that's our legal system at work. That's what it does. So, in part persecuted, I was like, well, of course, the easy answer that I said that does not do justice to this is, well, don't commit potential crimes and you won't be persecuted. But the idea that if you really, with evidence, again, not just off like some charge, but with evidence, have committed some kind of a seeming crime, that can be investigated. Okay, that's what our judicial system does. And then if there isn't enough evidence, I mean, well, this is a whole different conversation. I won't go in that direction. But at any rate, you know, criminalizing the opposition, I wouldn't define weighing evidence, deciding if there's a credible case, and then doing that, having a case, as necessarily criminalizing the opposition. But that's a much bigger conversation.
James just said maybe Nikki Haley could improve her chances, even though she's already dropped out, if she did acquire the UK and expanded the country rather than limiting the country. Sorry, made me laugh.
Yeah.
He's really, really trying hard to get the UK in the United States.
I
don't know
know.
what his angle is, but I want to know more.
And Dave, the founder blob, did not want a king, except there were some members of the founder blob who might have been open to it, even though they wouldn't have said so out loud. Okay, now we're 7 minutes after.
Okay,
So
okay.
I guess we should wander. So here's what's going to happen now. We are going to go to the after party. What that means is if you beamed in through the NCHE website, stay right where you are, and poof, you will be in the after party. And the after party is simply us talking about whatever the heck we want to talk about without being recorded, so that we can really talk about whatever we want to talk about. If you are watching us on Facebook, you need to leave Facebook and go to ncheteach.org/conversations. That's ncheteach.org/conversations. And then you too, poof, will be in the after party. I want to thank you all as ever. Thank Zabo the Avocado Claire and Annie and John and Jessica and the NCHE generally for making this possible and for being here and for helping to create this community. I want to thank all of you guys for being here week after week and truly making this amazing community for all 208, 7, 9 episodes that we've been here. Probably 8, I don't know. But at any rate, it matters. It matters that you guys are here. It matters that we can ask questions. It matters that we can say, I don't know. This conversation, it matters because we work through things. I beam in with a conversation about something that seems significant either in the news and or ideally just historically and generally speaking. It matters that there's a place where we can get together and discuss what we think of it and process it. And yes, Tim, I'm not going to say it now. You can't make me say it. And I didn't say it today. This is true. If you're playing bingo, you're out of luck.
But you got a double poof, someone mentioned. We said poof twice.
There was a double poof. Okay, so a double poof. If you're new here, sometimes people play bingo with words that I say very reliably, and poof, I poof every week.
Now we did it 5 times, James said.
That's right. At any rate, thank you guys for coming. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. And I will see you in a week. I got thumbs, I got applause, I got it all. I offer it all back to you guys and more.